Okay, well, thank you all very much for coming. This is marvelous. I wasn't expecting anybody to give up this beautiful afternoon. I really wasn't. So hats off to you. This is a great start. Well, we had intended that this would be a debate, but as typically happens, the pro-fluoridation people refused to debate. So I always have to end up debating this tie. They promote fluoridation like parrots and they defend it like chicken. Now, as far as debates are concerned, people are kind of split on that. According to the French writer Joseph Joubert, he said, it's better to debate an issue without resolving it than resolving the issue without debating it. And debates are especially important when you remember that in science, I think it was Aldous Huxley who said this, a beautiful theory can be destroyed by an ugly fact. And there are many ugly facts about this practice. So that's one view of debates. It's the essence of democracy. It's the essence of science. Nothing is beyond debate in science. Albert Einstein said he thought that the only law which would never be overthrown was the second law of thermodynamics. Everything else, he said, was up for grabs, but not in the dental community. This is their attitude to debates. This is Michael Easley, a well-known proponent of fluoridation. His speciality is insulting opponents, but he does work for several states, or has worked for several states. He says, debates give the illusion, I want you to count the insults, by the way. Debates give the illusion that a scientific controversy exists when no credible people support the fluorophobic's view. Like parasites, opponents steal undeserved credibility just by sharing the stage with respected scientists who are there to defend fluoridation. Unfortunately, a most flagrant abuse of the public's trust occasionally occurs when a physician or a dentist, for whatever personal reason, uses their professional standing in the community to argue against fluoridation, a clear violation of professional ethics, the principles of science, and community standards of practice. It's absolutely extraordinary that anybody could write that. But he feels that way, and the promoters of fluoridation, including the American Dental Association, the Michigan Department of Health, have actually advised dentists not to debate me. That's their advice. Well, so much for that. So what is the background of this crazy fluorophobic person that you're seeing in front of me? But anyway, first examine both sides. I urge you to look at the arguments for fluoridation, which you can get from the ADA's website, and study those, and then you can study the arguments against fluoridation on our website, fluoridealert.org, which is largely been built by my son Michael. It has the largest health database on fluoride's health effects of anywhere in the world. I mean, there's more information on that website on health effects of fluoride than all the information put out by all the health agencies in countries that promote fluoridation. And I'm not exaggerating. You can check it out. So, introduction to me, since 1985. Well, let me give you an earlier introduction, since this is fairly informal. I first came to the United States in 1966. I grew up in England. I've had exactly half my life in England and half in the United States. And I came over to do a PhD in biochemistry at Cornell. But then I lived up to the statement, one of my favorite statements is from John Lennon in his song, A Beautiful Boy. He said, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. So my plan was to do a PhD in biochemistry, but a year and a half into that, and I get overtaken by the Vietnam peace movement. And that in turn led to Vietnam Summer, which was organized by Martin Luther King. And then from that to the McCarthy for President campaign, and from that to the Lowenstein for Congress campaign, and that to the Biafra campaign, where I met my wife in New York City. That went on for 2 years. And from that, a few months later, what seemed to be a copy of Biafra, Bangladesh. We were involved in Bangladesh. Then we started having babies, we settled down in London, and I went back to teaching. And about 1978, I got dragged into the anti-nuclear campaign, and then that eventually led me to read two books which were very influential in my life. The Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher, who I got to know personally. Wonderful man, one of the best books on the environment. And secondly, The Limits to Growth. And when I read The Limits to Growth, that was devastating to me. It was so, the logic was so simple. You can't have infinite growth against finite resources. And that's what we have on this planet, is finite resources. At some point, the lines will cross. And that left an indelible mark on me, and that's what persuaded me to go back to university. So some 13 years after I started my PhD, I started a second PhD at Dartmouth in chemistry, graduated in '83, then went to St. Lawrence University for the quiet life. I thought my activist days were over, but life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, and the college librarian said to me one day, "What's the issue of incineration? They're trying to build a trash incinerator in our county in northern New York." I said, "It sounds like a good idea to me." And she says, "Well, you better read these." And she gave me papers on dioxin from Barry Commoner, with which I was absolutely appalled, because I'd only heard of dioxin in terms of Agent Orange, accidents like Seveso in Italy. And the thought that we could produce dioxin simply by burning household trash was just astonishing to me. Anyway, we started a campaign against that local incinerator. And because I was a professor in chemistry, I was invited by many other communities, including Detroit, to come and fight their incinerators too. And to cut a long story short, that's taken me, after 29 years, that's taken me to 49 states in the US, 7 provinces in Canada, and 61 other countries, 62 in a few weeks' time. Now, I say all that as a prelude to fluoridation, because when my wife asked me in 1996 to read some papers, I should have been suspicious, because she put a cup of tea on my desk at the same time. Doesn't usually do that. And I said, "What is it?" And she says, "Fluoridation." I said, "Take that away. These people are crazy." I didn't know I'd fallen victim to the pervasive and contrived notion that the people opposed to fluoridation are a bunch of Looney Tunes. And I certainly didn't want, I was so busy teaching chemistry full-time at a university, and then traveling every weekend and every break and every holiday to all these different countries and other places. I didn't want a third issue, and I certainly didn't want a third issue that would stigmatize me as crazy. But when I started to read those papers, I was humbled. I was ashamed that I'd fallen victim of this stereotype, but I was shocked. Anyway, just to go back to the waste story for a moment, last year I published this book, The Zero Waste Solution, Untrashing the Planet One Community at a Time. And that, I think, is my most important work. When I pass away, that's the book they're going to refer to as being the most important contribution I've made, because it's a stepping stone to sustainability. And I was delighted when Jeremy Irons, well-known English film actor, wrote the foreword to our book. He had hosted this movie called Trashed. I urge you to watch that if you possibly can. I met him at the premiere of the film in New York City, asked him if he would write the foreword, and he was delighted to do so. So run the clock forward then to the last 18 years, and I first started to study water fluoridation as a professor of chemistry, specializing in environmental chemistry and toxicology. And then now that I'm retired in 2006, as the executive director of the Fluoride Action Network. And I should disclose my financial interests. For those of you who think I'm here to make money, I think you've heard I'm not. But if there's any suspicion that I do this to make money, first of all, the proceeds of the book go to our Fluoride Action Network, not to me personally. I get a modest stipend from the American Environmental Health Studies Project. I doubt very much anybody on this planet would work for the stipend that I get for both my waste work and my fluoridation work. Money is not my driving force. I think my life has proved that. So I hope we can take that nasty attack. They're going to attack anybody opposed to fluoridation with anything they can come up with. And I think they find it a little difficult with me, because I obviously don't have ulterior motives. They're looking for them, but they're not there. You can trust me. I do not lie. I do not massage the data. There's no need to. You only have to talk, give the straight science for anybody with an open mind to recognize that this is a foolish practice. We should never have started. Just one more thing I'm going to say, and that before I start, and that is, I remember something that my Latin teacher said to us. I was 12 years of age at the time. I've never forgotten it. He said, the best definition of an educated person is someone who can entertain his or herself, and that doesn't mean with video games. We didn't have those things anyway. Entertain a friend, and entertain a new idea. And if you believe that that's a good definition, I think it's a fabulous definition of an educated person. If you believe that, that means that many professional people with high degrees, many people teaching at university are not educated because they've lost that open mind, that ability to entertain new ideas. And it also means that people who have never been near a university or have never become a professional in anything are highly educated because they have retained that open mind. So I am talking to the latter, not the former. The former won't even come to my presentations. Their minds are so closed, they do not want to have their belief system threatened by any new facts. So this work culminated in the book that's at the back. This is 4 years ago, in October 2010. And the important thing about this, when people are attacking me, they keep referring to my book. This book was written by 3 people. This man, James Beck, MD, PhD, physicist, and Professor Spenny Micklem, who got his doctorate from Oxford. He taught biology, immunology at University of Edinburgh. These 2 men made this book. They took my shooting from the hip text and toned it down and understated things, not overstated it. And every single fact in this book is backed up with references to the scientific literature, 80 pages of references in all. And yet, and I hoped that this would raise the level of debate. I hoped it would get academics from university to get involved with the issue, to read it. I hoped that in my wildest dreams, I thought they might use it as a text in some course. But to my regret, I haven't had a single invitation to talk about this issue in a university. Not a single. In fact, when I went down, I was invited to talk at the bookstore at Colgate University. The bookstore at Colgate University. Well, I said, if I'm going to talk there, why didn't you ask the chemistry department or the environmental science department or any other department there if I could give a talk there as well, so I can talk to the students and professors? No, they wouldn't come near that. It's unbelievable to me. And I'll give you another little story about this. Shortly after it was published, I had a meeting with the New Zealand Ministry of Health. New Zealand is one of those few studies, like the United States, that has the majority of its citizens drinking fluoridated water. And I went through the whole book, and I got through to the end, and I said, look, I said, we've done, as 3 scientists opposed to an issue, in this case fluoridation, we've done everything that you could expect a scientist to do. We've made our arguments transparent. We've documented every argument. And I said, you have a practice of promoting fluoridation. I would like you to go through this book. You've got plenty of staff to do this. Go through the book and respond in kind. Produce the counter-arguments and document them as we have. After 4 years, they've done nothing. Nothing. But then, the Minister of Health, the head of this bureaucracy, goes on television and accuses the opponents of fluoridation of fear-mongering and misrepresenting the literature. And yet his staff, after 4 years, weren't able to produce any kind of written response to this text. nor, I should add, have any of the promoters of fluoridation in any of the fluoridated countries attempted a comprehensive or even a small written commentary on this book, which I again find pathetic, because if you turn the tables, if they had produced a book which says the case for fluoride, we and our colleagues within a few weeks would have addressed every issue. That's what we're up against. We're not up against science. If it was a scientific battle, we would have won this ages ago, as I think you will see. We are up against power. The power of government agencies and the power of professional bodies like the ADA, who have a lot of liabilities in this issue. A lot of credibility to be lost if they admit they're wrong, a lot of liabilities to be faced if they admit that they're wrong. In other words, they are the ones with an agenda, they are the ones that have invested interest in keeping this practice going. And the only rational conclusion that I can come to with this is that these powerful people are more interested right now in protecting this practice than they are in protecting the health of the American people. And that's a pretty sad thing, since they're working at the taxpayer's expense. Anyway, enough of the rant. Let's get down to some calm science. I will argue that fluoridation is unusual, is unnatural, is unethical, is unnecessary, is unsafe, is ineffective, and there are better ways to fight tooth decay in low-income families, which has been demonstrated in a number of non-fluoridated countries. So that's what I'm going to go through. Number one, fluoridation is unusual. The vast majority of countries in the world do not fluoridate their water. Most of the people drinking artificially fluoridated water live in North America. Over half live in North America, United States and Canada. 97% of the European population now drinks non-fluoridated water. Some started, but have stopped. Now, 4 of those countries listed there fluoridate their salt, but the majority, and these in addition. So I've got Austria, France, Germany, and Austria, France, Germany, and Switzerland there. And I understand that Spain has some fluoridation of salt, only impacting about 10% of the market. And the Czech Republic and Slovakia have also some fluoridated salt. But the simple fact is that the majority of European countries neither fluoridate their salt nor fluoridate their water. Yet, according to World Health Organization data, which is available online, and anybody can check this for themselves, tooth decay in 12-year-olds is coming down as fast in the non-fluoridated countries as the fluoridated ones. So this is the fluoridated ones. And if you were just to look at this picture, right, if you were a proponent of fluoridation, look, since we fluoridated the United States, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, tooth decay is coming down, it's working. And yet, if you then were to look at what was happening in non-fluoridated countries, how could you then claim that that reduction is caused by fluoridation when the same reductions are occurring in non-fluoridated as fluoridated countries? I'll come back to this because the CDC has, well, this is the line that the Center for Disease Control has used to persuade people that that tooth decay is coming down because of the fluoridation. I'll come back to that. Okay, so most people don't do it. Fluoridation is unnatural. Now, promoters of fluoridation love to say that fluoride is naturally occurring. They love to get across the notion that this is something natural, that this is something to do with nature. And they even go further and say fluoridation, nature thought of it first. Nonsense. Nonsense. What they're doing is to confuse geology and biology. What level of fluoride you have in your water has nothing to do with Mother Nature. It has something to do with the vagaries of which rocks the water has flown through. Nothing to do with nature. The rocks came first and nature came second. So what levels of fluoride? Well, I've just said that. But because something occurs naturally, doesn't make it safe. Arsenic occurs naturally. It doesn't make it safe. In fact, some Western states are spending a fortune removing arsenic down to safer levels. And millions of people worldwide have had their health ruined by naturally occurring fluoride and naturally occurring arsenic, particularly in China, as far as arsenic is concerned, particularly in Bangladesh. So, but nature has passed a verdict on fluoride, and it's not what the fluoridation promoters want to hear. Nature's verdict comes in the form of mother's milk, baby's first meal. I'm glad to see there's a baby in the back there. The level of fluoride in mother's milk is 0.004 parts per million. Extraordinarily low. Now, if you believe the fluoridation folks, then that means that every woman on this planet is fluoride deficient. That this is a fundamental flaw in evolution. This is the fact 18 years ago that persuaded me there was something wrong with this picture, because I just did not believe that nature had screwed up. That if the baby needed fluoride for healthy teeth, healthy bones, or healthy anything, then it would be in mother's milk, like all the other nutrients, etc. Now, yes, mother's milk can be deficient in certain things if the mother doesn't get certain things, if the mother doesn't get certain minerals, if the mother doesn't get certain vitamins. Because of her diet, the baby's milk would be deficient. But that's specific to the mother's activity. It's not specific to nature's activity. Nature says the baby doesn't need fluoride. And there was no impediment to nature getting fluoride, because life evolved from the sea, and the sea contains 1.4 parts per million. So if she wanted to use fluoride, she could do so. But she hasn't. There's not one single biochemical process in our bodies, in animals, that have been shown to need fluoride to function properly. Again, as a biochemist, that shocked me. Why are we swallowing something that has no known function in the human body? But going back to this number here, we fluoridate in the United States between 0.7 and 1.2 parts per million. Parts per million means milligrams per liter. So 1 part per million is 1 milligram per liter. So that means that a bottle-fed baby in a fluoridated community like Traverse City is getting between 175 and 300 times more fluoride than nature intended. So for me, mother's milk is protecting our babies from early exposure to fluoride, a known toxic substance, and we circumvent that protection when we put fluoride in the water, because millions of American parents that have to work, mothers who have to work, they can't breastfeed their babies all day long, and so they're forced to bottle feed. And if they're living in a fluoridated community, that formula will be mixed up with fluoridated tap water. And it's no good saying, well, you don't have to use fluoridated tap water, you can buy bottled water. There are many families in this country that cannot afford to buy bottled water, so they are forced to do this. So the third argument then is that fluoridation is unethical. We should never use the public water supply to deliver any kind of medicine, any kind of human treatment, for obvious reasons, really obvious reasons. So obvious, in fact, that since fluoridation began in 1945, they've never done it with anything else. They've never used the public water supply to deliver medicine. Yes, we put a lot of chemicals in the water, but they are to treat the water. What we're talking about with fluoridation is putting something in the water to use the water as a delivery system. And it's a clumsy one, because once you put it in the water, you can't control the dose, and you can't control who gets the medicine. Amongst the other preposterous things that they believe is that that fluoride is a drug with no side effects. There's no drug in the world that has no side effects. The only thing that they admit to is mottling of the enamel. No other health problems. No at all. Not at this level. No. Ask the pharmacologist if there's any drug that they sell where you don't have to bother to control the concentration, and you can give it to anybody, man, woman, and child, young, old, sick, poor nutrition. No. There's no other medicine that you can do that to. It violates the individual's right to informed consent to medication. A very important modern ethic, and you can read about that ethic on the website of the American Medical Association, any other medical association in the world. Now, what is their response to this? This to me is common sense. What's their response? Oh, it's not a medicine. It's not. Fluoride is not a medicine, they say. But in the definitions of medicines that I've seen, a medicine is a substance that is designed to treat, mitigate, or prevent a disease. And that's why they're putting fluoride in the water. That it's designed to prevent, mitigate, or treat dental disease, tooth decay. And I don't see how they can wriggle out of that, but they do. They state it categorically. Fluoride is not a medicine. So what is it? There's two things that go. It's a food. Well, I wouldn't want to live on that diet. The other thing, it's just a mineral. It's a mineral. Look, the definition of medicine is defined by its purpose. Whether it works or not is another issue. But if the purpose is to use this substance to treat a disease, then it is a medicine. So what is happening then, as far as the informed consent is concerned, is that you're allowing communities to do to everyone what an individual doctor can do to no one. An individual doctor cannot force you to take a medicine. He cannot do it. If he was to say, here's a glass of water, it's going to be good for your teeth, I require you to drink this, you must drink this, he could lose his license, forcing you to take a medicine. He could advise you to take it. What he's meant to do is to tell you what it's good for. He's also meant to tell you what the side effects might be, and then you are supposed to make the choice. Now, many of us don't take that freedom. We don't bother. We trust our doctor. The doctor says, drink this, we drink that. Have this leg off, we have that leg off, that kind of thing. We trust him. Unfortunately, fluoridation is a massive betrayal of this trust which has been built up over the years. Fluoridation is being prescribed and administered by people with no medical training. No agency is monitoring side effects. No agency is measuring exposure levels. No one's collecting the fluoride, measuring the fluoride in our urine, in our plasma, in our fingernails, in our bones. There's no monitoring to see if we're reaching levels where in other countries it's been shown to cause harm. No, not doing it. Some individuals should not be exposed to fluoride. People with poor kidney function. The kidney gets rid of as much as 50, maybe even 60% of the fluoride that we ingest each day is excreted through the kidney, thank goodness. The other 40 or 50% accumulates largely in our bones. It steadily increases over a lifetime. But if you have kidney damage, it doesn't do that so effectively. So you accumulate fluoride faster in your bones. So people with kidney damage should not get fluoride. Similarly, people with borderline or outright iodine deficiency shouldn't get fluoride, because with borderline iodine deficiency you're going to have lower thyroid function, and fluoride makes that worse. Fluoride makes borderline iodine deficiency worse. And we have millions of Americans right now with hypothyroidism, and fluoride could be making their condition worse. They shouldn't be drinking fluoridated water. No agency accepts responsibility for harm if and when it is demonstrated. Now, what what happens typically in a community like this, you raise your concerns, you have a ballot or whatever, you have a public hearing, and then you get all these dentists and pediatricians and state officials all coming in and saying, this agency says it's great, this agency says it's fine, wonderful, wonderful, and you persuade these poor councillors to go along with it. And yet not one of those agencies that is promoting this and persuading councils to do it takes any responsibility if harm is caused. Neither the Michigan State Health Department, no federal agency, none of these professional bodies are responsible, feel that they are responsible for any harm. So if any harm is demonstrated, it's going to be the council or the water operators who put the fluoride in that are going to be facing the lawsuits. Health agencies in fluoridated countries are doing a very poor job of conducting health studies. They're not even attempting to conduct the health studies which they critique that have gone on in other countries and have found harm at higher levels. No health agency has attempted to put the issue of sensitivity to fluoride on a scientific level. There are many people that claim that when they're exposed to fluoridated water, they come down with various ailments like rashes or headaches or nausea or gastrointestinal problems. And when they stop the fluoride exposure, these symptoms go away. And when the fluoride comes back in again, the symptoms recur. For them, it's pretty obvious that fluoride is doing this. They've tested themselves many, many times. But no single fluoridating government has taken this seriously. They dismiss it as anecdotal, have made no attempts, even when people have volunteered, to do double-blind studies to see if they're making this up or whether it can be, whether it can be demonstrated scientifically. No attempt. No attempt. And yet, listen carefully to this. It's exactly what you expect. For if you have a toxic substance and you know that at high doses it causes health effects, then you can anticipate, because of the normal distribution of a large population to any toxic substance, you're going to have a few people that are resistant to very high doses and a few people at one end of the distribution that are very vulnerable to low doses. So it's what you expect. So why aren't they following it up? Well, you've heard. They're working backwards. They do not want to find any problems. They have to protect this policy, and their attitude is if you don't do the studies, then there's no problem. They're making the mistake that the absence of study is the same as absence of harm, which is, of course, it is not. I told you that health agencies are not doing basic studies on children. We know that dental fluorosis, which is discoloration, mottling of the enamel, and I'll show you pictures of that later, is a biomarker of exposure to fluoride, overexposure to fluoride, before the permanent teeth have erupted. So in this country right now, we have millions of children with no dental fluorosis, millions with very mild dental fluorosis, millions with mild, millions with moderate, probably not millions, but thousands with severe. And we know that the severity of dental fluorosis increases with the dose. So we got a wonderful biomarker for exposure, which would be excellent. You could investigate any problem in childhood to see if it relates to the severity of dental fluorosis. They haven't done one study on that in the United States. Incredible. I mean, any epidemiologist would just love the idea of having a non-invasive biomarker for exposure in any analysis that they would do. Okay. All of this despite the fact that there's no scientific reason to swallow fluoride. So all these things are not happening or are happening, yet we know that they haven't produced any evidence that swallowing fluoride does anything to help our bodies. So there's no evidence that fluoride is an essential nutrient. Sometimes they will say that fluoride is a nutrient. It is not. In order to demonstrate that a substance is an essential nutrient, you have to do an animal experiment, starve the animal of that substance in its diet, and then demonstrate a disease occurs as a result of starving the animal of that thing. So if you starve the animal of vitamin C, it will get scurvy. If you starve it of vitamin B, it will get beriberi or something else. Never done it for fluoride. They've had 70 years to do that experiment. Fluoridation is unnecessary. In 1999, the Center for Disease Control, or rather, the Oral Health Division of the Centers for Disease Control. You know, the Center for Disease Control is an agency of about 20,000 people in Atlanta. Now, they've got every kind of specialist under the sun, medical specialists, toxicologists, epidemiologists, everything. But all the statements that come out of the CDC on fluoridation come from just one small entity called the Oral Health Division. And that's made up of about 30 dentists. And they are Tweedledum to the ADA's Tweedledee. Anyway, so that's who they are. Big promoter of fluoridation. A lot of taxpayers' money goes through the CDC to promote fluoridation around the country. Okay, so in 1999, they conceded that the predominant benefit of fluoridation was topical, not systemic. Let's be very clear about this statement, because it's not ambiguous. It's very straightforward. They said fluoride's carries preventive properties initially were attributed to changes in enamel during tooth development. Whoops, we were wrong. However, laboratory and epidemiologic research suggests that fluoride prevents dental caries predominantly after eruption of the teeth into the mouth. And its actions primarily are topical. So all those pediatricians, those professionals who were giving pregnant women fluoride tablets and babies before their teeth had erupted, well, it was useless and possibly rather dangerous, as we shall see. And some of them are still doing it. Some of them are still providing tablets for pregnant women. Unbelievable. Anyway, this admission by the CDC should have ended fluoridation there and then. 1999. If fluoride works primarily on the outside of the teeth and not from inside the body, why swallow fluoride and expose every tissue in the body when you can brush it on your teeth and spit it out? It's just common sense, basic common sense. And I would say common decency, because this also avoids putting it in the drinking water and forcing it on people that don't want it. So as soon as they saw this evidence, it should have been the end of fluoridation. But was it? No. Something continued to push these guys to continue to promote fluoridation. If anything, as the evidence that it is bad gets stronger, they push harder and harder. Fluoridation is unsafe. What we know is that there's many biological processes that are harmed by fluoride. None that are helped by fluoride. None that are needed by fluoride, but some that are damaged by fluoride. For example, fluoride inhibits enzymes, and that's why the earliest opponents of fluoridation were biochemists. Biochemists like Dr. James Sumner, enzyme chemist from Cornell University. He said, fluoride poisons enzymes. You don't want it anywhere near your body. That's what makes people sick when the enzymes are disrupted. And now we know it impacts other things like G proteins, which I won't go into, but I will answer questions on that. There's a good review of this from 2010 by Barbier, talking about biological effects at low doses, not high doses, low doses. Now, bottle-fed babies in fluoridated communities are exceeding the EPA safe reference dose. That reference dose is 0.06 milligrams of fluoride per kilogram body weight per day. And the problem here is that the baby's such a small mass, body weight, so the same dose that would be okay for an adult is certainly not okay for a baby. Here, the proof of this is in figure 2.8 in page 85 of this important review, the National Research Council review from 2006. Here's the figure in question. Basically, this figure shows the estimated average intake of fluoride from all sources, from individuals, from babies through to adults, drinking water at 1 part per million. Now I've ringed here. The ring, this is non-nursing infants. That means bottle-fed infants. The red line is the reference dose, the safe reference dose for fluoride, and that's, you can see that the bottle-fed baby is well over the safe reference dose. And you can also see the reference doses from different agencies range from about 0.05 to 0.07, and there's 3 other age ranges which are in that range. But it's the bottle-fed babies which is most important. 3, American children are being hugely overexposed to fluoridation. When they started fluoridation in 1945 in Grand Rapids, they thought at 1 part per million, between 10 and 15% of the kids would develop very mild dental fluorosis. And that was the trade-off. What they thought, a dramatic decrease in dental decay and a very mild form of dental fluorosis, which hardly anybody would recognize except for dentists. But today, the percentage of kids with this condition has dramatically increased. So this is again from the CDC, the big promoter of fluoridation. 41% of all American children aged 12 to 15, including both non-fluoridated and fluoridated communities, have dental fluorosis. And here's the figure. So 28.5% have very mild dental fluorosis, 8.6% have mild, and 3.6% have moderate or severe. And H. Trenley Dean testified, he was the father of fluoridation, testified in Congress that if you got mild dental fluorosis, then fluoridation was unacceptable. That was his position, testifying in Congress. So this is one end of the range for very mild. This is the most serious looking of the very mild. The other end of the range is white patches on the cusp of the teeth. But it can go up to 25% of the enamel impacted with these opaque patches. And 8.6% have this, which is up to 50% of the enamel impacted. And 3.6% have either moderate or severe dental fluorosis, which is 100% of the enamel impacted. So our kids are being overexposed, but and this is a marker of the first signs of toxicity of fluoride in the body. Now, for my view, sorry?
Can I have to go back to that very first one you showed? Because there's something else that I noticed that the very first one, that's the mild one. See how there's like, on the bottom that's the obvious part, but then you have like, it's a little more transparent, then there's modeling look that there's more opaque, and then there's more transparent, like that clearer part that's darker.
Yeah, I think what you're getting there is maybe light reflecting.
No, it's like I pointed out.
Okay, yeah.
Like up in here, and then up in here.
Yeah.
And then you got the clear, because I noticed that in my own teeth. I'm not getting the white parts, but I'm getting that.
Okay, so what happens?
Where it was fluoridated for a long time.
Yeah. What happens is that these white opaque patches can get stained, and they can go yellow, orange, brown, even black. So that's what's happening. I think you're seeing maybe some staining here.
I think, well, I can show you on my own teeth that it starts to look like, I started that like more opaque areas where you kind of, and more thin areas I could see through the teeth a little bit more.
Oh.
That would start, you can kind of see it on here a little bit.
Okay, I'll look at your teeth.
Yeah.
I'm not a dentist, so Okay, but the real concern for me is the whole assumption The whole assumption that was made from the very beginning when the US government endorsed fluoridation, the US Public Health Service endorsed fluoridation in 1950. The assumption that this could be going on in the baby's developing teeth, the baby's tooth cells, and that somehow fluoride would not touch any other tissue, only the teeth. They couldn't deny that because it's visible. But you know where the teeth come from, right? The teeth grow out of the bones. That's why some people talk about the teeth being a window into the bones. And so what happens that you don't see dental fluorosis usually until you see the secondary teeth, because what's happened between the primary teeth and the secondary teeth is the fluoride is accumulating in the bone of the jaw, and so when those secondary teeth come out, all the fluoride that's concentrated in the bone is shifting to the teeth. So if you can see this visible damage in the teeth, what about the damage to the bone? And a little historical note here. The first, Grand Rapids was the first trial. The second trial started in the same year in Newburgh, Kingston. Newburgh, New York, Kingston was the control. One of the things that they observed in the Newburgh trial was about a doubling of cortical bone defects in the children from the fluoridated community compared to the non-fluoridated community. They kind of brushed that over to one side, but it is a significant finding. Anyway, my concern is what fluoride could be doing to the brain. And we have now a huge amount of evidence, huge, that fluoride damages the brain. And I'm going to concentrate on this. It does other things as well, but I'm going to focus on the damage to the brain because I think that is the most serious. There's enough evidence here that if the EPA was to do an honest job, they would start banning an additive to motor oil with this amount of evidence. But they're turning a blind eye for a substance that we're putting in our drinking water. So anyway, let's look at the studies. Animal studies. Now, animal studies obviously have disadvantages, but one advantage with animal studies is you can control everything except the variable that you're changing. In other words, you can make sure that the animals are all the same except for one thing. One set of animals gets fluoride, the other one doesn't. Makes it very clean for studies. So over 100 animal studies have found that fluoride damages the brain, damage to the hippocampus, which is an important part of the brain in terms of learning, memory, neuronal degeneration, inhibitions of cholinesterase, an enzyme involved in neurotransmission, damage to nicotinic receptors, decreased brain glucose utilization, increase in oxidative stress. You don't need to know the details, but 100 animal experiments. Also, 30 animal studies which focused on learning and memory. And to this, you put animals in mazes. And you first of all train them to tell them where the cheese is and let them loose. And as I said, one set of animals gets fluoride and the other doesn't. And so various kinds of mazes, Y maze, T maze, Morris water maze, novel objective recognition test, open field test. 30 out of 32 studies have shown that fluoride lowers the animal's memory and learning ability. You would think that was pretty relevant, and not very high doses. Lou, for example, 5 parts per million. You have to dose a rat 5, 10, maybe even 20 times as much to get the same level of fluoride in the plasma, which is the critical place for this for any tissue. So these are not high levels in these animal studies. Okay, then we've got non-IQ studies. We've got a lot of IQ studies, which I should come to in a moment, but non-IQ studies. I'm just going to talk about one of them. I can't pronounce this word. It looks like the Ray-Osterreich complex figure test. What happens here? You show the young child this figure, and you ask them to copy it. There it is in front of them, they have to copy it. And then you take the figure away and ask them to recall it. And what did they find in this very good
test done in Mexico where they controlled for many key variables. It's a good test. Approximately 9 out of 10 children were unable to copy this figure as expected for their age range. And as far as recall is concerned, 6 out of 10 were less able to recall that figure than other children of their age. Very, very striking. Now, as far as IQ studies are concerned, 41 out of 48 studies done in China, India, Mexico, and Iran have found an association between fairly modest exposure to fluoride and lowered IQ in children. And 17 of them, oh, they done at such high doses, don't worry about it for America. Wait a moment. 17 of these tests, the lowered IQ occurred at less than 4 parts per million, which is the so-called safe drinking water standard. So don't tell me it's not relevant for the United States. Below our safe drinking water standard. Now, most people heard about these IQ studies for the first time in 2012 when this meta-analysis was published by a team from Harvard University. Anna Choi, who I met in China, and Philippe Grandjean, who is one of the world's experts on mercury. He's just written a book called The Only One Chance, talking about the chemical brain drain that he sees from exposing young children to these toxic substances like mercury and fluoride. Okay, so what do? They did a meta-analysis of 27 studies. You can only do a meta-analysis, that means putting all the studies together, if they use the same methodology. And the methodology here was to compare the IQ of children in a village where there's high fluoride exposure to a village with low fluoride exposure. In some of the tests, the exposure was from coal burning, coal heating, cooking with coal, etc. But in most of them, it was fluoride in the well water. And this was published in Environmental Health Perspectives, which is one of the leading environmental health journals in the world. Now, they did acknowledge that there wasn't enough information for many of these tests. They would have liked much more information. But not all of them. Some of the studies were done pretty well with a lot of information revealed. But what they did underline was the results were remarkably consistent, considering in this case the 27, 2 of them were done in Iran, 25 in China, from all different places in China, by different research teams, at different times, and yet they all came up essentially with the same result. 26 of the 27 studies found a lower IQ for the high fluoride village compared to the low fluoride village. And the average drop in IQ from all these studies, the average was 7 IQ points, which is substantial. Now, again, the charge is that the concentrations in the high fluoride village were so high that you could ignore it as far as communities are concerned in America that are fluoridated. Well, look, these are the concentrations in the high fluoride villages. Now, just to simplify this and give you a quick indicator of making this judgment, you need a safety factor of 10. Once you find harm in a study, and especially if it's a small study, and you see that dose, then to determine a safe dose to protect everybody in the large population, you divide the harmful dose by 10. And that becomes the basis for your safe reference dose. So how many of these is concentrations, not doses, but assuming that kids all drank 1 liter of water and all our kids drink 1 liter of water a day, how many of those you see over 10 parts per million? None of these studies give you an adequate margin of safety to protect all our kids. And some of them, such a ridiculously low margin of safety it is criminal to continue this practice. But I'll get into more details with this, you'll see in a moment. So let's look at some more details on the IQ study. This one is close to my heart because I was invited to China by Zhang. That's a mispronunciation of his name, but I find it easier to say Zhang. I was invited by the Chinese CDC. So here you have the irony. The CDC in America is trying to put fluoride in your water, and the CDC in China is trying to take it out. So when they do studies, they're trying to see what level you need to get it down to protect their citizens. Anyway, I was taken to the 2 villages in this study. One village had low fluoride in their well water. The average was 0.36. A high fluoride village, the average was 2.5. And as far as eyeballing it is concerned, these villages looked identical to me. They were about 60 kilometers apart. There were no obvious signs of industrial pollution. They had the similar diet, similar housing, similar schooling. Everything seemed to be the same. A very stable populations, been there for hundreds of years, their families. They control for lead exposure, they control for iodine, and in retrospect, they've gone back and measured arsenic in the well water. And of course that may have changed, but right now the arsenic levels in the low fluoride village were higher than the high fluoride village. So arsenic is not an explanation for the lowered IQ in the high fluoride village. So they found across the board a drop of 5 to 10 IQ points and a shift of the IQ curve for both males and females. And this is worth looking at. See that? So the black line is the low fluoride village. The mauve line, the dotted mauve line, is the high fluoride village. And you see the way the curve is shifted all the way over. Now I should come back and look at this in a little bit more detail later on, but what I want you to notice is you get a decrease, a significant decrease in the highly intelligent children here, and an increase in the mentally defective children. But I'll come back to that point and the significance of that on a population level a little bit later. Now, Zhang did something that nobody else has done. He took the high fluoride village and divided the children up into 5 different groups of ascending fluoride concentration. So here it's 0.75 parts per million, 1.5, 2.5, 3.3, 4 parts per million. And look what happens to the IQ of the mean IQ of those children in those subgroups. You see the IQ is dropping. 99, 95, 92, 89, 78. Here's a plot. As the fluoride concentration goes up, the IQ goes low, goes down. So this isn't just the crudity of comparing 2 villages. You've subdivided the cohort and you've got what looks like a dose response, which obviously every time scientists want to find that dose response to establish a relationship. He also looked at the percentage of children that had an IQ less than 80. Less than 70 is mentally handicapped. Less than 80 is borderline mentally handicapped. And look at the way, as the fluoride concentrations go up, the percentage of those kids with lower than 80 IQ, 10%, 14%, 21%, 37.5%. Here we go. Another what looks like a linear relationship. That is highly significant. Highly significant. And I would put to you that the last kids in our country that could stand a lowering of IQ is children from low-income families. They've already got many strikes against them. Where they live, what their diet is, schooling and everything else. They've got so many strikes against them. And guess what the target is for fluoridation? Children of low-income families. So precisely the kids that you're targeting for this so-called benefit of reduction in tooth decay are precisely the ones that are going to be hurt most in society. And as a whole, society is going to be hurt because we're going to be spending much more money on social